In the scorching summer of 1480, 500 armored knights faced an Ottoman army of 70,000 soldiers. When the massive siege guns finally shattered Rhodes's ancient walls, the defenders didn't retreat. They turned physics itself into a weapon, making thousands of elite Ottoman troops literally slip and fall to their deaths. Picture this. July 27th, dawn breaks over Rhodes. An Ottoman soldier, part of the elite Janissary Corps, charges through the breach in the fortress wall. His boots hit the rubble slope, and suddenly he's sliding, grasping at air, tumbling backward into his comrades. 1 becomes 10, 10 becomes 100, 100 becomes 1,000. The breach becomes an avalanche of falling bodies. But here's where it gets insane. This wasn't an accident. This was engineered. The numbers alone defy belief. 500 knights versus 70,000 soldiers. That's a ratio of 140 to 1. These weren't just any defenders. They were the Knights Hospitaller, warrior monks who'd spent 2 centuries perfecting the art of fortress warfare. And they weren't facing just any army. This was the force that had conquered Constantinople. The army that hadn't lost a major siege in decades. The stakes. Rhodes was Christendom's last fortress in the eastern Mediterranean. If it fell, nothing stood between the Ottoman Empire and Europe's soft underbelly. By the end of this video, you'll understand 3 impossible things. First, the secret. Defensive substance that turned breached walls into death slides. Second, why the Ottoman Empire's most elite soldiers, warriors who'd conquered from Baghdad to Belgrade, couldn't stand up, let alone fight. And third, how a grandmaster with 5 crossbow bolts in his body led a charge that changed history. What happened next defied all military logic. The Ottomans had the numbers, the guns, the experience. The knights had stone walls, steel armor, and something else. A substance so simple, so devastatingly effective that when you learn what it was, you won't believe professional soldiers fell for it. Literally. To understand how knights turned rubble into a weapon, we need to go back 3 decades. If you're fascinated by the untold stories of history's most ingenious defensive battles, hit that like button and subscribe for more epic war content. Ring the notification bell to never miss these incredible tales of military genius. Now, let me transport you to the blood-soaked walls of Rhodes. 1453, Constantinople falls. The last Byzantine emperor dies on the walls, and Mehmed the Conqueror walks into the Hagia Sophia. From that moment, the Ottoman Empire began a systematic conquest that swallowed kingdom after kingdom. Serbia, Bosnia, Albania, all fell like dominoes. The message was clear. The age of Christendom in the east was ending. But 350 miles southwest of fallen Constantinople, on an island shaped like a spearhead, stood Rhodes, and it refused to fall. The Knights Hospitaller weren't ordinary warriors. These warrior monks had controlled Rhodes since 1309, transforming it from a pirate haven into the most formidable fortress in the Mediterranean. They were international, organized by linguists, tongues representing the nations of Catholic Europe: France, Germany, England, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Provence, and Oranea. Each lang was responsible for defending a specific section of the walls, creating internal competition that drove defensive innovation to extremes. Enter Pierre d'Orbisson, the Granite Grandmaster. At 57, this French nobleman combined the tactical brilliance of a general with the charisma of a crusader. Knights who served under him described a man who slept in his armor during sieges, who knew every stone of Rhodes' fortifications, who could calculate artillery trajectories in his head. What happened next would test every ounce of his genius. The Ottoman commander presented a fascinating contrast. Mehmed II, born a Greek Christian, had converted to Islam and risen through Ottoman ranks to become admiral of the fleet. Imagine the psychological complexity. A former Christian tasked with conquering Christianity's last Eastern stronghold. Some whispered he still made the sign of the cross in private. Others said his conversion made him more ruthless, desperate to prove his loyalty. Rhodes mattered for 3 reasons. First, geography. It controlled the sea route between Constantinople and Egypt. Second, economics. Every Ottoman merchant ship had to risk hospital raiders. Third, Symbolism. While Rhodes stood, the dream of reclaiming the Holy Land lived. The fortress itself was an engineer's nightmare. Multiple defensive rings, walls 12 to 20 feet thick, towers reaching 90 feet high. The Tower of St. Nicholas guarded the harbor like a stone giant. But the knights knew stone alone wouldn't stop Ottoman cannons. The same weapons that shattered Constantinople's thousand-year-old walls. So they prepared something else. In storerooms, beneath the fortress, they stockpiled barrels of a common substance. The Ottoman spies reported it, but dismissed it as cooking supplies, a fatal miscalculation. This is where the story takes a bloody turn. By 1480, Sultan Mehmed II had conquered most of the eastern Mediterranean. Rhodes was the last holdout, a Christian dagger pointed at Ottoman shipping. The Sultan assembled his force, 70,000 to 100,000 men, including the legendary Janissaries Christian boys taken as children, trained from birth to be the perfect soldiers. The siege train included bombards that could hurl 600-pound stones. When Ottoman sails appeared on the horizon in May 1480, both sides knew this would be different. May 23, 1480, the horizon turned dark with sails. Ottoman GS, 160 of them, materialized, like a plague of locusts. Aboard those ships, an army that would make most kingdoms surrender without firing a shot. Let's understand the sheer scope of Ottoman power converging on Rhodes. Infantry, 70,000 regular troops. Hardened veterans of campaigns from Persia to Poland. Elite forces, 5,000. Janissaries, the Sultan's personal killing machines. Each one capable of putting 3 arrows through a breastplate at 100 yards. Siege specialists, 2,500 miners and engineers, who'd perfected the art of bringing down walls from below. Artillery, 12 massive bombards, including one monster named the Basilisk that required 100 oxen to move. Against this tide of steel and gunpowder stood 500 knights hospital. But here's where raw numbers lie. These weren't 500 ordinary men. Each knight commanded a support team. Squires, sergeants, crossbowmen. Total professional soldiers, 2,000. Add 3,000 civilian volunteers, merchants, sailors. Even women and children trained to haul ammunition and patch walls. Grand total, 5,500 defenders. The mathematics of doom. Each defender faced 14 attackers. But the knights had one more trick. The fortress itself was divided among the languis. Each section a matter of national pride. The French held the most exposed section. The English manned the Tower of St. George. Germans fortified the section near the Jewish quarter. This wasn't just organization. It was psychological warfare against themselves. No nation would be the first to fall. Then physics became a weapon. Dobasar ordered something strange. Every household to surrender their stores of olive oil, animal fat, and tallow. Massive cauldrons appeared on the walls. Barrels accumulated in strategic positions. The Ottomans had never seen anything like this level of preparation. Pattern interrupt. While both sides prepared for conventional siege warfare, the knights were engineering something unprecedented. In underground workshops, they mixed substances. On the walls, they calculated angles. What happened next would shatter Ottoman confidence forever. The Tower of St. Nicholas became the focus. A 90-foot giant guarding the harbor. Ottoman strategy was simple. Reduce it to rubble. Storm through the breach. They'd done it at Constantinople. They'd done it at Great. Rhodes would be no different. Except Rhodes had Pierre d'Orbison. And d'Orbison had a plan that would weaponize the very rubble the Ottomans created. Pre-battle preparations reached fever pitch. Women sewed banners with images of the Virgin. Children learned to spot the whistle of incoming stones. Knights heard final confession and sharpened swords already sharp enough to split silk. But in the storerooms, away from prying eyes, the real preparation continued. Barrel after barrel of rendered fat, olive oil, and a special mixture that would turn stone into ice. The Ottoman commander established his position carefully. The Janissaries occupied the forward trenches, first to fight, first to die, first to claim glory. Behind them, provincial troops from Anatolia, eager to prove themselves. The artillery positioned in a semicircle, each gun pre-sighted on a specific section of wall. What made grown soldiers pause wasn't the walls. They'd seen higher. It wasn't the knights. They'd faced Christians before. It was the silence. Rhodes didn't negotiate. Rhodes didn't send envoys. Rhodes simply waited. June arrived with crushing heat. Ottoman engineers began their work. Trenches creeping toward the walls like wooden snakes. The defenders watched, waited, prepared. Every night, knights would slip out on raids, slitting throats, burning supplies, leaving calling cards. Rhodes remembers. Constantinople. But wait, it gets even more unbelievable. The first Ottoman bombardment was scheduled for dawn, May 24th. The basilisk was loaded, aimed at the tower of Street Nicholas. The gunner spoke the prayer, touched flame to powder. On May 23rd, the first Ottoman cannon fired. The sound would not stop. For 89 days. The opening bombardment shook Rhodes to its foundations. 1,000 cannonballs per day. Imagine the mathematics of destruction. Every 90 seconds, somewhere on the walls, a 300 pounds stone sphere smashed into medieval masonry. Dust clouds rose so thick that defenders fought in an artificial twilight. Day 1 through 10, the Tower of Street Nicholas took the brunt. Each impact sent shock waves through stone that had stood for centuries. Cracks appeared. Mortar crumbled. But something unexpected happened. The rubble didn't clear away. It accumulated, creating rough slopes against the walls. The Ottomans saw opportunity. The knights saw something else entirely. Underground, a different war raged. Ottoman miners, masters of their craft, drove tunnels toward the foundations. The plan? Pack them with gunpowder. Bring down entire sections at once. But Rhodes had Greek fire specialists who'd inherited Byzantine secrets. Countermeasures detected vibrations using bowls of water, then dug intercept tunnels. Here's where it gets insane. The underground battles were fought in total darkness, knife against knife, men drowning in mud and blood. One Greek miner's account survived. We heard them, breathing before we saw their torches. Then hell came to earth 20 feet below it. Daily life under siege developed its own rhythm. Dawn, collect the dead from night raids. Morning, women and children hauled stones to patch walls while nights slept. Afternoon, prepare for the evening bombardment. Night, raids, repairs, and prayers. The Virgin of Firmos, Rhodes's sacred icon, was carried along the walls nightly. Soldiers swore she pointed to where the next day's attacks would come. By day 30, something shifted. The constant bombardment had created multiple potential breaches. Rubble slopes now reached halfway up the walls in 3 places. Ottoman officers could taste victory. They didn't notice the defenders' strange behavior. Instead of clearing rubble, they seemed to be shaping it. Perspective shift to Ahmed, Janissary captain, in his journal. The Christians work at night like demons. They do not repair their walls. They do something to the fallen stones. My men report strange smells like a kitchen before feast day. What happened next defied all military logic. Dorbisan ordered civilians to start rendering every piece of animal fat in the city. Cooking oil vanished from homes. Even lamp oil was requisitioned. The massive cauldrons on the walls bubbled day and night, but not with pitch, with something else. Day 40. First probe attack. 2,000 Ottomans tested the breach. Near Street Mary's Tower. The rubble looked stable, climbable. The angle seemed perfect, about 30 degrees, rough enough for purchase. The first wave advanced confidently. Then came the moment that broke Ottoman morale forever. As boots hit rubble, defenders poured their mixture. Not boiling oil, not yet, just regular olive oil mixed with rendered fat. The effect was instantaneous. Soldiers' feet shot out from under them. Men in full armor tumbled backward, crashing into those behind. The breach became an avalanche of bodies. Crossbow bolts found easy targets in the chaos. In 20 minutes, 400 Ottomans died without a single defender leaving the walls. But the knights had one more trick. They'd mixed sand with the oil, creating an abrasive slurry that clung to everything it touched. Day 50. Mining war intensified. The Ottomans' master miner, a Serbian who'd brought down Belgrade's walls, drove his tunnel under the bastion of Street George. Packed with gunpowder, it would create a breach even rubble couldn't fill. Countermeasures detected it barely in time. What followed was pure medieval genius. Instead of intercepting, they dug beside it, then flooded both tunnels with Greek fire. The explosion, when it came, went sideways instead of up. 100 Ottoman miners died instantly. The child who saved the O section deserves special mention. Maria, a fisherman's daughter, noticed ripples and water buckets along one wall section. She'd felt earthquakes before. This was different, rhythmic, human. Her warning came just hours before a massive mine would have detonated. Dorbasaw himself kissed her forehead in thanks. Religious visions multiplied. A night swore street John the Baptist appeared, pointing to weak spots. Civilians reported angels reinforcing walls at night. The Ottoman camp had its own supernatural reports. Jinn protecting the Christians. The ghost of Constantine the 11th walking Rhodes's battlements. Supply situation grew. Desperate for both sides. The Ottomans consumed food for 70,000 men daily. Rhodes cut off from resupply rationed everything. But here's the strategic brilliance. The Knights had planned for this. Massive cistern held water for a year. Grain stores could last 6 months. The oil and fat, they'd been stockpiling for 3 years. By mid-July, the moment of truth arrived. The walls finally fell. July 27th, 4 a.m. The Ottoman War Council made its decision. 3 breaches had opened. Street Mary's Tower, the Italian section, and the critical position, the post of Street Paul, where the French contingent held. 20,000 troops massed in the darkness. The elite janissaries would lead, followed by provincial troops. Then a final wave of volunteers seeking paradise. Dawn broke like blood across water. Ottoman drums thundered. The attack signal. 20,000 voices roared. Allah Akbar. The ground shook with running feet. This was it. The main assault that would decide everything. The breach at Street Pool's post was 30 ft wide. Rubble forming a rough ramp at a 35 degrees angle. Perfect for assault. Or so it seemed. The first janissaries hit the slope running. Scimitars raised. The flower of Ottoman military might. Charging into history. Then physics became their enemy. The first warrior's foot hit what looked like stable rubble. Instead, his boot skidded sideways. The oil mixture, 3 parts olive oil, 2 parts animal fat, 1 part water, had been poured just before dawn, still fresh and slippery. He windmilled his arms, trying to recover, then crashed backward into his comrades. But here's where it gets insane. The domino effect. One falling man in armor becomes a human bowling ball. The second rank, charging hard, couldn't stop. They piled into the fallen, slipped themselves, created an expanding catastrophe of tangled limbs and weapons. The breach became clogged with its own attackers. From above, hospital crossbowmen had perfect targets. These weren't moving warriors. These were men struggling to stand, to crawl, to escape the press of bodies behind them. Every bolt found flesh. The mathematics were brutal. A crossbowman could loose 8 bolts per minute. 50 crossbowmen on the breach meant 400 bolts per minute raining into packed masses. Statistical shock. In the first 20 minutes, 2,000 Ottomans died on a 30-foot breach. But then, reversal. Ottoman officers recognized the trap. They ordered men to bring sand and sawdust from the siege works. Bags of dirt flew hand to hand. If they could cover the oil, create traction, the assault could continue. For a moment, it worked. Fresh janissaries gained footing on the sand-covered sections. The Knights' counter-adaptation was brilliantly brutal. They prepared for this. New cauldrons appeared, not oil this time, but the same mixture heated to boiling and mixed with quicklime. This wasn't just about making men slip anymore. This was about creating an
environment where combat became impossible. The boiling mixture hit the sand and created steam clouds. Quicklime burned through leather, found gaps in armor. Men who'd maintained footing suddenly screamed, clawing at their eyes. The sand turned into burning paste. The breach became a vision of hell steam, screams, the stench of burning flesh. Individual combat vignettes emerged from the chaos. A janissary officer, Hassan the Bold, actually made it to the top of the breach. For 30 seconds, he fought 3 knights simultaneously, his scimitar a blur of motion. Then his foot found an oil patch. As he fell, a knight's mace found his helmet. His body rolled down the slope, knocking down a dozen men trying to climb. The French knight Guillaume de Voon left this account. They came like lions and died like sheep. The breach drank their blood, mixed it with oil, created a crimson mud that no man could cross. I saw elite warriors, men who'd conquered half the world, reduced to crawling, slipping, dying without ever crossing swords with us. Then came Doubleson's wound and charge, the moment that would echo through centuries. The Grand Master stood observing from the second line when 5 crossbow bolts found him almost simultaneously. One punched through his shoulder, another lodged in his thigh, 3 more penetrated his breastplate. Testament to Ottoman marksmanship, even in chaos. Blood pooled at his feet. His aides tried to carry him back. "A Grand Master dies standing," he growled. Then, incredibly, he pushed forward. What happened next still makes historians shake their heads. Doublesson, streaming blood, raised the banner of the order and charged into the breach. Not from above, he descended into the killing ground itself. Knights who saw him swore he glowed, probably sunlight on blood-slicked armor, but the effect was electric. "Rhodes! Rhodes! Street John!"
And victory! The cry spread along the walls. Defenders who'd been rotating out for rest grabbed weapons and followed their dying leader. The countercharge hit the Ottoman forces just as they'd gained the breach's top through sheer weight of numbers. But wait, it gets even more unbelievable. Dorbasan shouldn't have been able to fight. Blood loss alone should have dropped him. Yet witnesses describe him killing 5 men in single combat, his sword never missing despite wounds that would have failed an ox. Modern historians suspect adrenaline and possibly opium for pain, but contemporary accounts called it miraculous. The tide turns. Ottoman morale collapse. Imagine you're an Ottoman soldier. You've charged through hell. Your comrades are dying in heaps. You can't get proper footing. Your elite Janissary units are being slaughtered by crossbowmen they can't reach. Steam blinds you. Quicklime burns you. And now down into this chaos comes a blood-soaked old man who should be dead, followed by knights singing hymns as they kill. The panic started in the center and spread like plague. "The Grand Master cannot die," someone screamed in Turkish. "Their God protects them." Men who'd faced death across 3 continents suddenly broke. The ordered assault became a rout. Bodies created additional obstacles. The Ottoman dead piled so high they formed barriers. Men trying to retreat slipped on blood mixed with oil. The same surface that had doomed their advance now trapped their retreat. Knights waded into the press, maces and swords rising and falling with mechanical precision. This wasn't battle anymore, it was butchery, multiple. But then, moments kept reversing the flow. A fresh Janissary unit punched through on the left, gaining the walls. The English contingent counterattacked, led by John Kendall, who reportedly killed 12 men before being cut down. The Ottomans brought forward their reserves. The knights rang every church bell in Rhodes, the signal for total mobilization. Cooks, stable boys, priests, everyone who could hold a weapon rushed to the walls. Sensory overload consumed the breach, screams in a dozen languages, metal on metal creating a devil's symphony. The smell, oil, blood, burning flesh, voided bowels, and quicklime creating a stench that made hardened warriors vomit. Visibility dropped to feet as steam and dust mixed. Men killed anything that moved, sometimes their own comrades. The English knight who held the breach alone deserves special mention. Sir Thomas Sheffield, already wounded in the arm, saw Ottomans breaking through near his section. He planted himself in a narrow part of the breach where only 2 men could pass at once. For 10 minutes, timed by the cathedral bells, he held against waves of attackers. Found dead still standing, his sword broken, surrounded by 23 Ottoman corpses. As the sun reached its zenith, the impossible had happened. The Ottoman assault, which should have overwhelmed the defenders by sheer numbers, had shattered against physics and psychology. But the day wasn't over. Fresh Ottoman units masked for another push. The defenders were exhausted, running low on crossbow bolts, many wounded. Then came the moment that broke Ottoman morale forever. Mehmed Pasha himself appeared, rallying his forces for one final assault. He'd held back his personal guards, 2,000 fresh troops. If anyone could take the breach, it was these men. They formed up, began advancing. Dioran, who by all rights should have been dead or unconscious, appeared again on the walls. Blood covered him head to toe, his own and his enemies'. He raised a cross overhead and shouted something. Accounts differ on the exact words, but the effect was immediate. Every church bell in Rhodes rang out. Every defender who could stand appeared on the walls. Women brought fresh oil to pour. Children stood ready with crossbow bolts. The Ottoman guards took one look at the breach, the corpse-clogged, oil-slicked, blood-soaked gateway to hell, and stopped. Just stopped. Then, without orders, they began backing away. The assault was over. As the sun set on July 27th, something unprecedented had happened. The retreat began as a trickle, became a flood. Ottoman officers screamed orders, threatened executions, but discipline had shattered like glass. Elite janissars, men who'd never retreated in their lives, stumbled back from the walls, eyes wide with something beyond fear. They'd faced death before. This was different. This was physics itself turned against them. The casualty revelation came at sunset. 9,000 Ottoman dead in a single day. 9,000. Let that number sink in. The breach at Street Paul's Post alone held 3,500 corpses in a space 30 feet wide, bodies piled so high that the last attackers had been climbing their own dead. The oil and blood mixture had created a horrific paste that would take days to clear. But the real genius was yet to be revealed. Doba's survival defied medical logic. 5 crossbow bolts, massive blood loss, fighting for hours in full armor under the July sun. When his aides finally convinced him to accept treatment, the surgeon, Brother Dominic, a German who'd studied in Paris, found something remarkable. 2 bolts had miraculously missed major organs by finger widths. The others had struck armor reinforcement points, penetrating but not deeply. The surgery itself became legend. No anesthesia except wine and opium. Dobasar insisted on staying conscious, dictating orders while Brother Dominic extracted arrowheads. If I sleep, they'll think me dead. Rhodes needs to see its master standing. He appeared on the walls that very evening, bandaged but upright. Night casualties, 200 dead, 400 wounded. A 40% casualty rate among the 1,500 engaged. Every single French knight at Street Paul's Post bore wounds. The English contingent lost half its number. But they'd held. Against 20,000 attackers, they'd held. The Ottoman camp that night was chaos incarnate. Wounded men screamed for water. The stench of defeat, literal and metaphorical, hung over everything. Desertion started immediately. Provincial troops, seeing what happened to the elite janissaries, simply melted away into the darkness. By dawn, 5,000 men had vanished. Disease followed defeat like a loyal dog. Dysentery spread through the Ottoman camp. 70,000 men in summer heat with inadequate sanitation. Within a week, more men would die from disease than had fallen in the assault. Morale plummeted further when word spread that the knights had treated their Muslim prisoners well, while Ottoman wounded were left to die. This next part sounds like fantasy, but it's documented fact. On August 7th, a full Ottoman war council convened. Mehmed Pasha faced a rebellion from his own officers. The Janissary commander spoke first. "We are warriors, not mountain goats. Give us enemies to fight, not oil-slicked stones to climb." The artillery chief added his weight. "My guns have opened 3 breaches. If Ottoman valor cannot take them, perhaps Ottoman valor has limits." Personal stories emerged from both sides. The English knight, John Kendall, found dead at his post, had fought with a broken arm strapped to a shield. His squire's account, he said pain was God's way of keeping him awake. Maria, the girl who detected the mine, died in a bombardment 3 days after the assault, but not before being formally adopted by the order, the only female member in its history. Mehmed Pasha's decision came August 17th. Maybe his Christian birth influenced him. Maybe seeing the breach filled with Muslim dead broke something inside. Maybe he simply recognized the impossible. But his order was clear. We sail with the morning tide. The withdrawal was more panic than strategy. Ottomans abandoned tons of supplies, several cannons too heavy to move quickly, and hundreds of wounded. The great basilisk, the gun that had shattered the tower of Street Nicholas, was spiked and left behind. As Ottoman sails disappeared, church bells rang across Rhodes. Not the frantic clangor of alarm, but the steady, triumphant peal of victory. Immediate celebration mixed with exhausted reality. Yes, they'd won, but at what cost? The city was in ruins. Hundreds of families mourned their dead. Food supplies were dangerously low, and everyone knew this was a reprieve, not a final victory. The Ottomans would return someday. Daisong ordered something remarkable: honorable burial for all Ottoman dead. Knights and Turks were separated, but both received proper rites. The mass graves were marked with simple stones reading, "Brave men far from home." Even in victory, chivalry endured. The child who saved the Umayyad section received a posthumous honor unique in the order's history. Maria's name was inscribed on the rolls as Sister Maria, defender of the faith, enemy of minds, friend of Christ. Her parents received a pension for life. What made grown soldiers weep wasn't death, it was the aftermath. Ottoman prisoners expecting torture and execution instead received medical treatment. Many converted, not from force, but from shock at Christian mercy. One Janissary officer's testimony survives: "We came to kill Christians and learned what Christians truly are." The Virgin of Philormos, carried nightly around the walls, was credited with the victory.
15 separate witnesses swore they saw her pointing to danger spots. Modern historians note that the icon's carrier, Brother Paolo, was also the order's best military engineer. Perhaps divine inspiration had earthly help. But the victory at Rhodes would echo far beyond these blood-stained walls. The strategic impact was immediate and lasting. Rhodes bought Christendom 42 years, until 1522, when Suleiman the Magnificent would return with overwhelming force. But those 42 years mattered. They gave Europe time to strengthen, to prepare, to unite. When the Ottomans finally took Rhodes, they faced a different Europe, one that had learned the lessons of 1480. Ottoman military adaptation began immediately. Never again would they assume a breach meant victory. New siege manuals specifically addressed the Rhodes problem: how to assault rubble slopes. Countermeasures were developed: wooden planking, advanced sand supplies, special shoes with spikes. The age of simple, overwhelming force had ended. European reaction was electric. The last crusading victory, they called it. D'Aubusson became a cardinal, dying in 1503.